Um, let's call the meeting to order. Lori, please.
Mike Berlin,
Here.
Laura Negro, Pat Kinney,
Here.
Ron Stendor,
Here.
Martin Vitak,
Here.
Thank you. Quorum is present. Item 2 is approval of the agenda. Do we have any additions or deletions? Anyone? Look for a motion.
I'll make a motion. We accept the agenda.
I'm sorry, who was that?
Ron makes a motion. Marty seconds it. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carried. Item number 3, public comments, 3 minutes. Any public comments out there? I see some people online. Yes? No, no one has their hand up. Go ahead.
Good morning. My name is Mick Brennan, Sheriff for Ashland County. I don't see we have a line item on here for agenda for discussion, so I'd like to bring it up at this time. The wages that we had talked about, discussed at the last Finance Committee, of adjusting the elected officials' pay. And it would be brought up at a later date. Well, our later date's running out of time. It has to be set by April 15th when the papers come out. And I'm not sure when the next meeting is going to be. But I thought that was going to be brought up in this. I asked for it to be on the agenda today, but I see it's not on here. So I just wanted to say that, again, re-emphasizing the fact that in order to have good candidates, you're going to have to compensate them at a rate of pay. You all know that. Mr. Pufall made the allusion to it last time, how underpaid they were for command staff and the sheriff. I am not running for another election, so it doesn't affect me. I'm just trying to help the county by having somebody that's going to be qualified and is going to get paid according to what the other county officials are being paid and what other sheriffs in the direct vicinity are. So
Excuse me, what was that date again?
April 15th.
April 15th.
I believe at the last meeting, thought it was going to be in May. I had spoken with our county administrator since that meeting, and I believe he said it was April 15th was the date that it could come.
Yeah, yeah, correct. Papers for November election can be taken out April 15th. That's the first day to collect signatures, and then June 1st is the filing deadline.
So as it stands right now, if nothing's done or no action's taken on this, the next sheriff, whoever is elected, will start off at $67,114, which is a 2% increase from what I'm getting right now. So, which is probably about 18 to 20,000 less than what our neighboring counties are getting. So, just like to bring it to your point. I know we can't discuss it because it's public comment, but I'm just a little disappointed to see that it wasn't on our agenda here today. So, thank you for your time.
Thank you. Any other 3 minutes? Any other 3 minutes? Let's move on. Approval of the Finance Economic Development meeting minutes. Everyone had a chance to look at these? Do we have a motion to approve? Pat?
I'll make a motion to approve, then I have a comment.
Ron Stendor, second.
And my comment is, the last name of the person from Madeline Island that was here at our previous finance meeting, the spelling of his last name, there's a question mark in the minute. The spelling is Kuchta.
So that's a correction.
That's a correction to replace the question mark in the minutes of the person that attended the last finance meeting.
Do you
Thank
have
you,
that,
Pat.
Lori?
Yep, thank
You're
you, Pat.
welcome. You're welcome.
We have a motion, a second, and a correction. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
I
Opposed, same sign. Motion carried. Number 5, we have some consultants here with us, Steve and Mike.
Good morning,
Ron.
welcome. So I think I'll start off. There's a couple agenda items on here too that we'll participate in as you go through 7 and 8, I believe. So 6, 7, and 8, I think. So number 5 is our report or update on the action items that we're responsible to get done for you. So I think everybody has a copy of it. It was either attached on the internet or there are copies here too. So if anybody doesn't have one and would like one, we can get you one.
Yeah, it's the one that looks like this. I think you have one with colors on though, that document.
So like
That
that.
has the,
Okay. So the first couple here deal with tax delinquent properties. I don't know that there's really any update on those. I think we're still in kind of a holding status on that with the court case.
Yeah,
that's
we're,
going on.
yeah,
it's not in color, but. it's the
yeah, the
same.
court may rule this spring. That's the earliest we've heard that would happen.
So let's see, the other ones you've implemented, like the insurance assessment and adopt a plan to implement. You hired M3. I think they're helping with you. They're going to be presenting here today. Policies and procedures regarding past due collections. There are documents that document the processes there. Those may be amended as we go along here because we will start an accounts receivable module that's getting implemented currently. And so we'd probably recommend that there be some procedures around that to uniformly handle any delinquent accounts that you may have. Access to Springbrook software that was completed. I think most employees have access to it now that need access. In departments, department heads and administrative staff all have access to run reports, process accounts payable transactions. I know some departments are running full speed with that. Others will be beginning very shortly. So I think that's moving along very well, and hopefully departments will see the results of that, and it will reinforce doing that. Establishing target dates for state aid reimbursements. We did meet back in November with HSD as the primary department there. And we were accepting of what their due dates were. They were usually by the 15th or the 20th of the next month. Things were completed from the month before so they could report accurately and correctly. Establish procedures and policies for a 5-year capital plan. That's actually on your agenda today. To consider doing that. So that'll be coming forward. The adopted general fund balance policy, which would say that you'd keep at least 2 months worth of operating expenditures in your unassigned balance. That will be coming shortly. We have given sample copies to the county, so that will be drafted and presented to you, which will just simply state what we're saying here to have. The goal is to have that. You won't be there immediately, but that's the goal you would strive for, is to have 2 months in reserve as unassigned or working capital for the county. The next 2, 9 and 10 are to be determined. They weren't priorities at the time. 11 is completed. We've worked with Sue to record the tax levy directly into funds. So instead of it all going into the general fund and transferring out to human services or highway or what have you, it goes directly to the fund that the levy is targeted for, which in the end doesn't change anything, but for your financial statements, it makes it look a lot cleaner that you have huge transfers out that don't need to be transfers out. The county road and bridges fund was created. So prior to that, highway operated all in one fund. And most counties have 2 funds, one being the business operation of the highway, which is on your books, Fund 71. So that's the fund that, has all the people, the equipment, they do the work on the roads. The other fund, which is Fund 21, is what the county budgeted for work to be done on your roads, the county roads. And then the Fund 71 will bill Fund 21 for the work and get paid. 71 will also bill towns and anybody else they do work for, the state, for that work. So that will operate as a business enterprise type fund. And the other fund will be what the county is investing in its roads for the infrastructure. 13, budget to actual report that the county board or other officials could get. We're very close on that. We just have to pick out the format. The budget's getting adopted in 2022, or recorded in 2022. It was adopted, but it's got to get put in Springbrook. Sue's working on that. Our target for that will be that either your March or April financials will be able to sign up county board members or whoever else to get a automatic report emailed to you that will go off on an interval, probably monthly would be probably my recommendation. And the report will get emailed to you and you'll be able to see updated budget to actual, for the county. 14, to provide department access rights to Springbrook. That was completed back in October. The next one, 15, the role function is something that will be coming with the employee self-service module. So, and what that refers to is if Dan is my supervisor in my payroll setup, it will say that I report to his position, county administrator, and then my timesheet would go to him. So that's all set up properly. So in the sheriff's department or highway, if there are mid-level managers and they want to see timesheets from other people, and then they'd approve them and send them on, so on and so forth, that hierarchy can be programmed in there so that those get routed to the appropriate person that would know if the person worked or not, or whether they're supposed to work or not. Policies and procedures to enter accounts payable disbursements, that is going on right now. I know certain departments, I know the sheriff's department is doing it and has been doing it all along here since we implemented this back in December, I think. Others are trickling in. Amber does it at highway. So, I mean, I think it's working very well. And there's a couple more that haven't done it yet that will be doing it shortly. So clerk of courts has to. Good. So, and the goal there is in the software package that you have, attachments can be attached. So images of like invoices and things like that, so that departments that have access to that, which all departments do, they could drill in and go right back to the invoice and see what they paid for, which I think is tremendously helpful. Having been a former department head at a municipality, it was very important for me to know what we had paid for budgeting, budget monitoring, and for budget preparation for the next year. It's huge. Utilize Springbrook receipt module to replace the manual receipts. That went live February 7th, but then we did go back to the first and enter all the receipts in the treasurer's office. So those are in the process right now. The treasurer is kind of doing a dual entry here. They're still handwriting receipts for the time being. But I suspect that that will shortly go away and we will just be on the computerized receipts in Springbrook. So I stopped in at Treasury yesterday and I think they're doing very well. I mean, I think it's not a tremendously difficult task, but it was new and it was changed. So, to get comfortable with that took a little bit, and I think they're well on their way. So it's working good. Establish policies and procedures for designating sheriff, clerk, zoning, health, and different departments as potential receiving stations. I think the next plan of attack was to have the clerk's office become a receiving station, and then probably like sheriff or, and then maybe look at human services. Not every area will become a receiving station, just because they have their own systems kind of built in, like clerk of courts has CCAP that they use. So there are controls in place there that wouldn't necessitate adding this to that. So that's underway. So more and more will be added to it as we go along here. Next one is to purchase and install the accounts receivable module in Springbrook. That was purchased. We went through we did a questionnaire. We had our first kind of meeting with them. I believe now the plan will be that like highway probably will go as one of the first ones, because Amber is very good at using stuff like this, and possibly forestry too. And the goal here is that departments would issue an invoice off of the system that would be sent to the customer. And then the payments we'd try to get them routed directly to the treasurer so that they don't get sent to a department, which then has to take it to the treasurer. It could come directly. Now, I'll tell you, there'd probably be a little lag time there too, because we're counting on the other end of this transaction to change their vendor file to change the address. So it doesn't always go to Amber or to the forestry office. But we'll get there. That's the goal. That strengthens internal control. It gets the cash faster to the treasurer too, so that you have it in the bank. It's not sitting in an office somewhere. So all those things I think are important for consideration. Purchase and install the payroll reporting module and employee self-service. That the county has signed an agreement to do that. That will be our next step after accounts receivable is implemented. 21 is kind of a little bit of a redundancy of the other one to do the report to the board. We will use Tableau to do that. That's a reporting module that kind of bolts onto your Springbrook and allows us to have that set up to go off automatically. So that should be either March or April of 2022. Then the next one was regarding financial procedures for departments. The county has implemented this, I think is important, positive pay on your bank account, the general checking for the county. And what that means is you report to the bank every check you issue, the check number and the amount of the check. So that when checks come through your bank, the bank can check it and check the number and the amount to make sure that you issued it. I think there was an issue in one of the accounts where somebody forged a check and sent it through and it wasn't one of the county checks. And so this type of security feature will hopefully prevent that from happening. Doesn't mean that a check couldn't go through. It would mean that if a check came through that wasn't in the list, it would give the county a exception that you could look at and go, oh, yep, that one's okay, or no, what's that doing there? So it's a security feature that I think is very important for municipalities, because while we're sitting here right now, somebody's trying to figure out a way to get everybody else's money. You can stay even with them. I don't know if you ever get ahead of them. So that's being done currently. I know the treasurer's office sounds like everything's working pretty smoothly there with reporting. So
Yeah, we had a few little hiccups. but-
yeah, good. So the other ones here, let's see, internal controls. Yeah, this will be,
Stuff like AP scores, graduation rates, et cetera. I'm trying to.
oh, okay. So documentation of all county financial procedures, that's kind of an ongoing thing. And we will have a financial team meeting after this meeting with the county staff. And that's one thing that we want to challenge them to do, is to help draft that. We have documents from other entities, but it has to be tailored for Ashland County. So that we'll look for county staff to assist with that. Policies and procedures for internal control over time reporting. That'll be part of the employee self-service, that everybody will enter their time. It'll be approved by a supervisor or department head and submitted for payroll. I believe 25 and 26 were completed. 27, I believe you've contracted with Carlson Detman to do an employee classification system, so that's in process. 28 is important from the standpoint of the county needs to have some, what they call uniform grant guidance procedures. Those are required if you accept federal funds, especially over 750,000 in a year. The auditors have to do special testing of transactions and make sure that you're complying, that you check people that you contract with to make sure that they're not suspended or debarred from doing business with the federal government, things like that. Those policies and procedures would spell out what the county needs to do to be in conformance with spending federal dollars. 29, capitalization of the county roads and bridges. I know Mike is working with Amber on that, and I think that's well underway. Number 30 was a recommendation to just consider, right now the county pays out for accrued sick time upon retirement. And I believe our suggestion there was to look at maybe grandfathering in current people, but new people hired after a certain date wouldn't be eligible for that benefit, so that eventually the county gets out of that business of having those payouts down the road. So that's the last one on there. I don't, well,
You say most places have done that.
yeah, most places have done that where they've kind of sealed off and respected the fact that people had it, grandfather them, but then going forward, not perpetuating the payouts. And I'd be happy to answer any questions anybody would have. But I think things are going very well. I appreciate working with Sue and Dan and Amber and Pete and everybody that we've worked with here. It's going very well. With anything, you know, it takes time to make the change. And I think it's within reasonable tolerances that we're getting the changes implemented. So.
This is Pat. First, a comment. The work that you've done so far and the work that you're going to continue to do and the recommendations that you brought to us so far, for me personally, at least as a member of the Finance Committee and the County Board, it makes me more comfortable making decisions when we get to budgets and also when we get to the point when the wage study is done, so we can look at, you know, what we can do to fairly compensate employees, not just the elected and the unelected, you know, everybody. And as we get closer, I'm more comfortable that we're in a position to better understand our finances than I was when I started here nearly 2 years ago. I got a question on the 2 month of reserve, the unassigned reserve. I know that fluctuates with tax payments coming in. And so could you clarify at what point in time, if you had to take a guess, you think we would get to a point where we are always going to have a sufficient number for that unassigned reserve?
You mean to be within compliance with the
Yeah.
stated goal?
Because I know a year ago in January, we were, you know, challenged to,
Yeah,
you know, make some payments. And so it fluctuates with the taxes that come in. So we'll be above it, I think, at times with tax payments coming in. And then over
Sure.
time, the goal is to always have sufficient for 2 months.
yeah, that goal is to say what you have in your unassigned balance, which would be your working capital. So in 2 months is roughly 15 to 25%, I think be the target. And I would think, you know, well, number one, you know, depending on if the transfers go through that we're recommending, that gets you there a little quicker, right? Because you'd be moving money to the general fund. Whether or not that would put you in compliance right away, I don't think it would. But you'd get closer. And then every year, hopefully you would have some kind of surplus in your budget that would help with that. And then throughout the year, I think what you're alluding to is cash flow within the budget year varies because tax collections come in at different times. The county settles with districts and makes them whole. So you need money to be able to do that. And then you accept all the unpaid taxes and collect it, you know, after a certain point. And then of course your shared revenue doesn't come in the majority of it until November. So when you budget for it, you're budgeting for it like it's all here today. And that's why you need the working capital to kind of get you through those lean periods.
So in that recommendation, are you recommending and working with us to get to a point where we're always above that 2 month period of working capital? Because we'll hit it at times through the year for a while.
Yeah,
But you want to get us to a point where we always have that at any time during the year.
right.
Okay.
If I can just add a little bit, right now, you received your financial statements 12/31/20. You have those official now. I mean, it's 22, I know, but anyway, you have official 2020 statements. Your unassigned was 336,000. A relatively low number. The 16.5% or 2 months is almost 2 million. So at the end of 20, you were about $1.7 million lower than if you had this policy that we recommend the 2 months. We anticipate the 21, we just informed you had at least one very large tax deed sale that was unbudgeted. So you're going to anticipate having a surplus in 21, the number. So that would build on that 300,000. So, you know, that'll help. And then we do have an agenda item coming up that, if approved, will also help that.
And I think I appreciate your comments too, because, you know, sitting in your chair, having to make decisions, knowing that the numbers you're getting are accurate are essential to you making a good decision, right? And so I can only tell you that by putting these things in place, you will be able to make good decisions then going forward so that you can hit that goal. It doesn't happen overnight. The city I worked for when I started with them, their unassigned was like $11,000. It was like razor thin. That could have flopped either way and could have been a deficit. They are now above the target, but it took 8 to 10 years to get there. So it's not something that's going to necessarily, you flip a switch and it happens. Some things can help it, like the transfers that are being recommended. But then it's steady due diligence on the board's part and the county staff, and, you know, to set the course to where you want to get to and then stick true to it and make decisions based upon that. Does that make sense?
It does. And you said good decisions, and good decisions start with, I think, informed decisions.
Yep.
And then the other factor that comes into play with this is interest rates. When the county borrows, the better our finances and our audit, the better we are as far as the rates that we pay for debt service.
Yeah, if you go to market for an issue to issue bonds, you know, people will look at the credit worthiness of the entity they're buying the bonds for, in this case, Ashland County. And they'll make their decision on how much they'll pay for those bonds based upon the risk they're taking from the entity they're buying the bonds for. So yeah, you want to ultimately correct this so that you're in that compliance, so that you're out there on par with other issuers, so that you're not negatively affected when you go to market with a debt issue. Yep.
Do we have any more comments to the consultants, Mike or Steve? Yeah, Dan.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to thank them for everything they're doing. They've been really helpful. Also, there are several staff members I'd like to point out who've done a wonderful job. And I know I might forget people, so excuse me. But Sue has been instrumental. Amber, Lexi upstairs, Missy in the sheriff's office. They've been really instrumental in having this whole project move forward. And I thought the committee should know that.
Thank you. I want to also say thank you to both Steve and Mike over here for your time and efforts. At this point in time, before I go into the next agenda item, I'd like to welcome Laura. Glad to see you. Item number 6, capital improvement plan, excuse me. Who's going to take the lead on this?
And the newest version is sitting on your desks.
This is the handout. Okay.
It's the one that,
Yeah, the handout.
It was not included in the original email, so it's something we have today. Yeah, this was not in the original email.
And
And
we'll
I-
put this on the website later today.
Okay. And I'll just kind of, like Steve said, this was one of our recommendations, and most larger governments or governments of your size and even smaller have developed what they call a KIP, a capital improvement plan. And it's a 5-year document usually. And usually it's done before the annual budget. So you would do this and like approve it, update it every year in like June. And it would have the subsequent 5 years. You know, if you did it this June, it would have 23, 24, 25, 26, and 27. And yeah, by department, and information will be received from the departments, evaluated by the administrator and with the department head and the finance committee per se. And they say, okay, this is all good. And it gives the county a more, forward-looking document saying, oh, in 2 years, we're going to need to borrow, or 1 year we need to borrow. Not like the last couple of years, you've been borrowing every year, sort of to accomplish one thing, to stay within levy limits, probably the main reason. But that's a little unusual, what we've seen in governments. Most of the time you borrow at, not necessarily every year, when you have big things coming up. And this document will will list the items that are being proposed and how they're funded. Sometimes they're funded with grants, sometimes you can fund them with tax levy, and sometimes, you might have to borrow money to fund them, but it's a more forward-looking document for planning. And what I did here, this is one I took from another county and modified it a bit for Ashland. And it's in a sense, a draft document. But to just want to go over one section of it on page 1, after the cover page, it lists the purposes of this document. And as you can see in the little introduction to the purpose, it says, inclusion of an expenditure or project into KIP does not guarantee it will be funded. And then it's got in there, it's not set in, you have something out there in 2024. It's not like set in stone that, yes, we're going to do it. You evaluate it every year. Maybe you move it to 25. Maybe you don't do it. Maybe you spend half the money you had originally in there. You change it every year per se. It's kind of a dynamic document where you're evaluating it every year as you go along. And you can see the reasons there are kind of summarized, I think, pretty well in this county that wrote this. It's a realistic schedule of capital outlay and improvement projects. It's for a long-term evaluation and perspective. The county board can see what we have planned. The general public can see this. It does tend to allow for better planning and future, just a longer term look. And I don't think we need to go through, obviously you need to get the information from the department heads, have discussion with administration and committees and say, hey, here's where we're headed here. It's not just a wish list for things we'd love to have. It needs to be evaluated, on a case-by-case basis. So this would be the first step to adopt something like that, have the county board adopt something like this. And then there would be a timetable that would be developed by administration. Departments would get a form to submit their potential projects, and then we'd go from there. So is there any questions? Yeah, yes.
This is Pat. On page 1, near the top, it says in the introduction, it says the plan represents a comprehensive prioritization of long-range capital needs to protect existing investments. And it strikes me that the list of what is needed to protect existing investment, roads, for example, may be more than what we're able to budget for at a given time. So you said it's not a wish list. I appreciate that. But and then later it talks about matching the needs with, the ability to fund them. Specifically, I want to ask you, given the language in there, should departments make that list of everything they think they need to protect existing business investments, and then from that prioritize it to what they think could be funding? And in a particular summer, if this is approved over the summer, I just want to make sure that the finance and board are on the same page with our department heads. Would whatever's approved in the summer for the capital improvement plan be something that the finance committee would expect to be carried over to the budget? Or would the plan, even in the summer, whatever is approved by finance, be something that's still under discussion and waiting for final approval later in the fall by finance and the board?
It normally has worked where, say you approve this in June or July. And at that time, you're planning on rolling a certain number into the budget to finance it. Is that always held to that number? I don't know, Steve could probably speak to how the city of Manitowoc did it, but occasionally I would think you find, because of other budget constraints, when after you get into the budget in August and September, You cannot fund it, all the KIP that's in there. I mean, there's got to be some give and take.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would think part of your question was, should departments give you the whole list of everything that they think, which would probably be a wish list, in my opinion. I think they should, just so that you can make decisions then upon what you're placing in the budget, because then you know the risk you're assuming if you didn't fund something, right? As opposed to not knowing and all of a sudden something failed and it bites you, you know, because you weren't aware of it. So within any plan, you know, you kind of set your goal for what you're going to put in your budget for the next year and then what the next 4 years are. But then that shifts from year to year because an asset that you plan to replace 3 years from now may have failed tomorrow. And so your plan didn't work perfectly, which is normal. But at least it keeps it out in front of you so that you're aware of everything that you're supporting and maintaining so that you can develop a plan. And then maybe, I don't know if there are competitive advantages, you know, to bid things together. Like if you have 2 roofs that are coming up, you could maybe do that to get a bigger project. You know, it just allows you to make those decisions.
Yeah, and I would agree that any investments that we want to protect, we should be aware of. And then, you know, 2 roofs at once, any opportunities to be more efficient, or if there's grant money out there, it would be good for that. So it's, if I summarize this accurately, when we get to the summer on this, we should all, department heads, staff, administration, finance, make a good faith effort to look at the level of funding that we think we're going to be able to put into this in the fall, and then understand we may need to make some adjustments.
Yep.
Okay.
So Steve, I have a question with
Yeah.
regards to this draft. Are we going to have a final to this so that board can approve this and take it to the county board for final approval, or is this it?
Well, this was my run at this for you guys, and you can look through the procedures and change, you know, we have $5,000 in here for a
I see
unit
that.
cost, you know. Some people might say in today's world, maybe that should be 10 or 20 even, you know, and
Yeah.
so that's the 5,000. This is from Washera County, and I did this in 2017. So it's even 5 years old with these numbers in there, and the way prices have gone up, you know, 5,000 is a fairly small number these days. So
Mhm.
anyway, but it's up to you. And I see I left, and I don't know if you noticed this, Sue, but those account object codes should be, oh, she's gone. Shouldn't be in there because that's what Washera County's numbers.
Yeah.
Yeah, we should take that out of there. I didn't do that, so sorry. But anyway,
So those modifications would be made for Ashland, and then, you know, depending on if you agreed with what we're kind of suggesting, you could adopt it. If you thought differently, you just change it and then adopt that amended document.
yeah.
Or
I see a plan like this as a real good, eyes open, heads up planning feature for our government. This is part of the piece we've been missing as we've been budgeting along, because we've been going from spot to spot to spot, constantly trying to either put out fires or make money come where we didn't have it. So this gives us that long-term advantage. Dan, are you comfortable with what's inside here besides those account numbers?
Yeah, I am. I agree the $5,000 could be adjusted. Most counties and municipalities still use 5,000, but that's because they've used it for the last 20 years.
We can always change it.
Yeah, you can always change it. And I would encourage you, everyone, to look through it and see if there's other spots that you think could be changed. I mean, I don't think there's much that we do need to change, but other than the account numbers.
Otherwise, I would be willing to make a motion that we pass this with the account numbers from Washera County out. And I would include the $5,000 for the first year so that we use this, or first
Yeah.
block that we use it just as a getting used to the process.
Yeah, you can change it anytime.
so then in fact, it's going to be a living document for us. Good.
Yeah.
We have a motion on the floor. Looking for a second.
This is Pat. I'll second it. Then I'd like to make a comment. I would also appreciate if we could add a paragraph to summarize the response from our consultants to the questions I asked. And I asked that question because I'm thinking about in the future, when other people are looking at this document, is it clear that we're all supposed to make a good faith effort on being on target in the summer when we discuss this, but understand that it may need adjustment later? And I ask that because I don't want in the future people to think, well, if it was passed in the summer, it's set in stone. We would all need to realize that it still could be changed, but we should all come to it with a good faith effort. So it's as close as possible to where we're going to end up in the fall, all things considered, so that there's not misunderstandings or hard feelings generated from that later. Just some clarity on that,
Yeah.
or just a few sentences, but
Yeah.
help me at least.
Yeah, well, Lori and I will talk with the consultants and get the exact language, and we'll stick it in the minutes for this committee to approve next meeting. And so if there's something you want to change, we can amend it at the next meeting.
Are you going to take a draft of a few sentences to summarize the response they gave me to my questions?
Yeah,
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. And we'll put it in the minutes.
So one of the things that was discussed earlier as well is that this document, we sort of engage or put this document in gear in, say, June, the beginning of our budget for the following year. Should that be identified as well, or just leave that kind of at will of the, what do you call it, the budget committee or the finance committee, the future finance committee to, if they want to start the budget in June or July or August, the later you start the budget, the more helter skelter.
Yeah.
This is giving us a, much like Laura and Pat is saying, direction. This is what we've been missing
Right.
forever. So,
Yeah, I would say, we're going to have elections next month, so we don't know who's going to be on this committee
right.
next month. So I would leave that decision to the next finance committee. Just because all of you, or some of you might be on here or not on here.
With that, we have a motion on the floor with some, what do you call it? Deletions of the object codes and what had Pat had indicated to. We had a second by Pat. I'll call for the vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carried. So then this document will be re-edited and brought to the county board.
It'll be re-edited. Yeah, and we'll send it off to the county board for the March 22nd meeting.
Thank you. Item next, item number 7, transferring of funds between highway and general funds. Is
Okay.
Steve.
Okay, this is there's a handout that I modified. Looks like this, small print, 2-page document. And if you recall, we had a similar document like this in December, but at that time we did not have the 12/31/20 audited financial statements. You have since received that. So I just revised this a little bit. And there's really 2 parts to this. One is, where are we at today with our general fund? And I kind of briefly said this before. You do have a $4 million general fund right now, but you can see 3.1 million is considered non-spendable. That's a classification in government accounting. What are the big numbers in there? Delinquent taxes is about $1.3 million or somewhere in that range of that is that. And the other big number in there is an advance to your health insurance fund of over $1 million. And this is not from current transactions. I think it's from 2 and 3 years ago, maybe even longer than that even. So when you had some health insurance years that were not very positive for you on your self-insured plan, and the general fund had to transfer money to cash flow that. So those are the big numbers that are in there. And eventually you could make transfers to the health insurance fund, a formal transfer, and reduce the non-spendable and give that fund, make that fund even. I mean, we recommend you do that because the chance of you generating a surplus of $1 million in your health insurance fund is probably remote. You know, you might get smaller ones to build up a little balance there. But anyway, it would make your, it does not change what I want to show is that unassigned number there is the key number, which we talked about a little bit before, 336,000. And then if you take your general fund, you got almost a $12 million general fund budget right now. And 16.5% or 2 months expenditures is almost $2 million. Like I said, you're about $1.7 million short of where you necessarily want to be. And then I kind of go over where all that's coming from there. That's not all that relevant. I mean, it's just that's what makes up the some of the monies that you need from other funds. That group health plan is $1,192,000. The advance to that right now. So anyway, so where do you have money? And you have the money people over in the corner there. The highway department does have in my opinion, a sufficient working capital. Now, just to go to the next page of this document under number 4, we kind of briefly summarize. Now, again, this is a year old because this is from the audit report. The highway department had net working capital of about close to $2.5 million. And by working capital, I basically take your cash account, current receivables minus current payables. That does not include inventory, things like that are more of a longer term nature. So anyway, right now their working capital is about 83%. Now this is again out of the audit report. Now with this change to the county road and bridge fund, if you recall, when we went through your the recommendations, your county road and bridge fund is about $1.2 million roughly, I think, of that number. So that will no longer be in here. That'll be sitting in a separate fund, this fund 21, just for the number. And that'll be used to as a cash flow for county maintenance and construction projects, really is what it's there for. It's supplemented every year by a tax levy and your general state aids. So anyway, that's why this is that's why it's right now it's 83%, but you take $1 million out of there, you know, it's still a fairly healthy number. And then, and I mentioned this before, the county has borrowed for highway capital equipment purchases at least the last 3 years. And those numbers, 350, 294, and 445. And they've been borrowed because, well, I mean, the county's general fund has a structural budget deficit due to delinquent taxes with the Indian property and some other things. So this money was borrowed to increase your levy in a sense. And then kind of under that additional information piece there, trying to explain that the way the Department of Transportation requires highways to account for machinery, there's a machinery rental rate that's set by the DOT. And that rate includes a recovery of depreciation on that piece of equipment. You know, if you have a 100,000 piece of equipment, last 10 years, there's $10,000 each year that is recovered theoretically by using that equipment to the state, the county itself, and local governments. So most highway departments in the state do not borrow for equipment purchases because they're generating this internally every year through this rental rate. So it wasn't usual to me when I came here and saw this, that you had 3 years that you put borrowed money in the highway department to pay for equipment. Now your highway, and I've said this a few different times before too, does operate, in my opinion, very well and has generally been able to either break even with their equipment fund, meaning recovering all your depreciation. Some years they have a slight positive. This year they had a relatively small negative. You know, it can bounce around depending on equipment use and, you know, if you have more major repairs to equipment than you normally have. So it can fluctuate a little bit, but your highway has been over the last 10 years fairly able to recover all its depreciation. So what I'm saying here, the county highway did not really need this money because it had generated internally. So we're suggesting a one-time transfer here. Of those 3 years of money, $1,089,000. Now the first, since we're talking, the 22 number hasn't even been put in that fund yet. So really what the transfer would be 644 of prior year money plus this new money of 445 and 22. So that's what I'm suggesting, that we think it would be, it would shore up your general fund, kick you up from that 300,000, you know, to like $1.4 million, and get you well on your way to where you need to be. So.
And the other thing I think, I would add is, like, you call it the road improvement fund, I think, Matt, Amber, that is going to be placed in your fund 2020, in your fund 21. So that is still there. So there's no, you know, that still exists. So all the plans Matt and the crew have to do things are not hindered at all by that. So I just want to point that out.
Yeah. Yeah, it's two different pieces of money we're talking about here. And right, because of your current accounting system, it's all mixed in one pot right now. But we're going to separate that out as of 1/1/22. That'll be separate. And it's much easier, in my opinion, it's much easier to understand where your highway's at by doing that. I mean, there were supplemental records that existed always kind of off the real books. But anyway, so that's what I'm suggesting. I don't, comments from the staff?
I have a question. What's your game plan for the 445 for this year? Like, I mean, being that it is budgeted for our equipment, I know you're saying, are we gonna be wanting to do transfers, or is this something we can
Yeah,
look
the
at
other,
year-end?
What is the question
The
exactly?
For the 2022 amount budgeted, the 445.
the other thing you need to remember with that money, it was debt levy. So it has to be spent for capital improvements. You know, you can't pull it out of our budget and just put it in the general levy without using it for capital improvements. Department of Revenue. We had an issue with that here a couple years ago when Clark was here. They said, don't do it again. So you need to be careful. That money has to be used for what it was budgeted for. Otherwise,
That's a
we will
good
run into
point. It was
issues.
borrowed and that was specifically listed. And, you know, so, and it's and the entries I gave the Sue to make to record the tax levy in 2022, put that in your highway fund.
I would say this, that I would tell Department of Revenue, we're taking the money the machinery fund made, not the amount borrowed, because then you're not taking the borrowed or the
Yeah,
levied
it's,
money. It's potato.
yeah. Yeah.
So I would like to make a statement if possible. All right, so I have 3 points that I'd like you to consider with this. So storms, inflation, and incentive. So if we were to have another storm like 2016, the highway department needs working capital to fix the damage. If our working capital is all taken away, the first consideration in a storm will be, how can we pay for this? Currently, with some cushion in our accounts, we can focus on the safety of the public and fixing the issues as soon as possible, not having to worry about the financial aspect of the damage. I've been told this will not be a problem, as the county will just borrow the funds needed at the time. But from what I've seen, the county board is very hesitant to borrow funds and raise taxes. I'd like to talk a little bit about inflation. The current inflation rate is between 7% and 8%, but this is for items like food and clothing. The inflation rate for energy products is about 30% and rising. This means our 22 budget will most likely be insufficient as we rely heavily on energy products such as asphalt, patching materials, fuel, and lubes. Also, we are seeing on average a 20 to 30% increase in parts and supplies for our equipment. If our cushion is taken away, we will most likely be coming back to this committee later in the year looking for funds to be able to continue our operations. And then I'd like to talk about incentive. If the committee decides to transfer the funds from the highway department back to the general fund, it would show not only our department, all the departments, that being fiscally responsible and trying to manage our operation in a way that saves money is not advantageous to that department. We work hard to find ways to be financially responsible, from taking very good care of our equipment to making it last and finding better and more efficient ways to do the work we need to do. Our department works very hard to be fiscally responsible. By transferring all the funds that we have worked hard to build up, where is the incentive for our department or other departments to do so in the future? With that being said, we would support the number you had mentioned, the 2020 and the 2021, that 644,708 as an immediate transfer. We see that as viable and doable. We do support that. But to transfer that 445 that is budgeted in this year's budget, we would like to hold off on that to see how the year goes with all the problems that could be coming up in the current year. Thank you.
Any questions from the board?
Well, I want to echo what our consultant said. I mean, the highway department is very well run, and we should all be very proud of Matt and Amber for doing what they do. Those guys do work really hard, and they really do keep our roads clean and keep our roads repaired, and they do a great job. And we all should recognize what Matt said about inflation. That's something that's going to be with us for the entire year, if not longer. It's liable to get worse depending on what happens in the world. But we do have a cushion to help Matt out if things get to that point. We still have the ARPA funding available, which is allowed to be used for normal governmental expenses. We do have to spend the money by the end of 2024. So if Matt runs into trouble later in the year, we do have that as a cushion, and we can give him some money there. So, I don't think the inflationary fears or anything should stop this committee from making the transfer. I think we can cross the bridge when we get to it with the other stuff, especially considering we have that ARPA money sitting there as a cushion.
Thank you, Dan. No? Okay. Laura?
I will make a motion to approve the one-time transfer from the highway department to the general fund of $1,089,708.
We have a motion?
I think this is in our best interest. It just clears up our bookkeeping.
And we have a second? Any further discussions? Which-
This is Pat. I appreciate the comments from our highway commissioner. Part of that's going to be proactive with requesting more funding if you need it, the energy in particular, at this time. So, do that sooner. What's being proposed for a variety of reasons is in the best interest of the county as a whole, which is what, we have to consider here. And I want to say that from an incentive standpoint, and I'm thinking back to my experience on the Austin City Council from 2010 to 2018, they went through a similar process around 12, 13, 14. And I think the incentive I always thought was, as the employees did their job to the best of their ability, saved money in whatever way they could. It took a while to build us some trust that if everybody, that worked, in that case for the city, and the same would be true for the county. To me, the big incentive was the more efficient the county is, the better position the county is to provide good pay and benefits once that wage study is done. And if everybody does that, it leaves the finance committee and the board in a better position to better pay and compensate employees. But it takes trust that everybody's in this together and everybody's going to do that piece. And yes, I know that compared to your peers, you're not funded as well, but I also know we're the second poorest county. So we need to be as efficient as we can for everybody's benefit. But you will have the same funding, and just be proactive if, things get expensive and go through the process. And the recommendations do better position the county for a variety of reasons that were discussed early to function.
Thanks, Pat. Any further discussion? With that, we have a motion on the floor, seconded by Ron. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion. We have one opposed. Motion carried. With that, let's continue to item number 8. Transferring funds from the sheriff's department to the general fund. Who? Steve, Mike?
Okay, I can try to summarize that quickly. Okay, there's a maybe to sort of reword the motion or the agenda a little bit. It's really transferring funds from sheriff's department bank accounts to the general bank accounts of the county. And I had a fairly long discussion yesterday with the sheriff and his staff about what we're proposing here. They have a separate checking account. They have I guess, 4 different accounts right now, one with a rather large balance, where the sheriff, and this is typical in most sheriff departments, where they deposit monies from for inmates. People make deposits there for inmate benefits, and the inmates use this money. But there's other revenues that are run through this fund that are generated from inmates. For phone use is a big one, for electronic monitoring revenues, and canteen sales. And so all these are kind of run together in this one bank account, and they've built up a balance. And some of this balance is probably from some unknown determination why it was there. It's been there for years. And maybe the sheriff can speak to this a little bit after I'm done. But anyway, it's over $100,000 is in bank accounts of the sheriff's department right now. Well, there's a list. I don't know, that's as of today, or I don't know when that is. But anyway, the 158,000 in total. 12/31/21. Anyway, okay. That second account on that list, that 51,000, that's their current working account, the 51,000. And it's a little higher than it should be at this, because I believe November and December revenues were not transferred to the county treasurer. So that number would go down substantially. The 98,000 and the 7,000 is somewhat old money, or outdated prior month money from unknown years, I guess. I don't know exactly. I didn't research that. That is what we are recommending. Those 2 accounts be closed and the money deposited with the county treasurer. Now, what most sheriff's departments have, or at least I guess I'm using Brown County, a relatively large county, as an example, because I'm most familiar with that one. They have created what they call an inmate wellness fund for the profit of canteen sales. Okay, prisoners are paying more than the cost for certain items in the canteen. The Department of Corrections and sheriff departments across the state, they feel, hey, that money was derived from the prisoners. Let's develop a fund for their betterment, different things that can enhance their life, I guess, to some degree, would be spent from that profit. Brown County, I talked to two different people there last week, and they use it for two different purposes. One for any kind of general, supplies and different things that for the prisoners. And the other one is for religious ministers and things coming into the jail. That's what they use their inmate wellness fund for. It's got supplies and expenses and contracted services is the way it explained to me. And that is generally done at the discretion of the sheriff's department personnel, drawing off that fund. It's a budgeted fund. And it's, you generally don't go and run over on it. I mean, I guess you could temporarily go negative for a month or something. Wouldn't be a end of the world because you're getting more money in the future. But that's the way it would work. And we would suggest that even though these accounts are under the control of the county's federal ID number, so the county treasurer could just move them, but you just wanted to sort of discuss this, giving you all the whole picture here on how that money got there and how to do with it. So my recommendation would really be threefold here, that you close the two sheriff bank accounts and transfer funds to the general county bank account under the control of the county treasurer, and that you consider creating an inmate wellness fund, accounting fund, not bank account, accounting fund for the profit on canteen sales. And you develop a budget for inmate wellness fund for 2022, because you don't have one, didn't have the fund when you developed your budget. So that's what I would suggest you approve as a committee. So I don't know if anybody has any questions or the sheriff wants to respond.
Yes, thank you. I would like to respond. The money that you see there, there's a misconception. That is all from canteen, all right? That's a commissary that's been there since the conception. Lieutenant Jones was the one who was in charge of that. That was the 98,478.56. We closed that account and opened up a new one because of the financial discrepancies that we had about a year ago. So the 51,223 is the new account with Stellar Services. That is a vendor that takes care of all the commissary and phones for our inmates. So that reflects the current account. We left the other one as is in case we found that there's any other bills or anything that were unpaid in the past, that we had that fund there to be able to pay for it. So I agree with Mike's suggestion of combining that with a 156,975, placing it into the account for inmate wellness so that it's available for the inmates. Those funds are for inmate only. We can't use it for buying a new boiler for the jail. We have a jail assessment fee that we use that for. This is for, we've got a program we're looking at now for $40,000 for inmate wellness program, was going to be a mental health counseling that we're going to have contracted with. We didn't have the funds for that before. We had it before, but we lost the funding for that because of the budget cuts. So now we have that available to us. My new administrator wasn't quite sure how she could use those funds until we found out by talking to other counties. And like Mike said, I've got an email from Brown County, who he alluded to as part of his study. And my jail administrator asked, the profit monies from canteen and phone service data and texters is what I'm asking about. Does your jail have full access to this money, or does it go to the courthouse accounts? Do you keep it separate accounting for that? My previous lieutenant always kept it in a separate account. Now the court's trying to take it away from us. And St. Croix County was the first to answer and says ours always has been, and for as long as I am around, always will be, a separate account for jail needs. The county has no access to those funds. Barron County said Barron is the same as St. Croix. Brown County, it is the same as St. Croix. So these larger areas are doing the same as that way we were doing. It looks like we have many different accounts. Our plan was to combine that, put it into one. So I have no problem having that funds go over to the county treasurer and have that account that we have out there, a wellness account for our inmates, available for us at any time. I don't want to have to go to the county board and say, I need to have this, and it's going to take 1 or 2 or 3 or how many months it's going to take for us to get the answer to that when they need it right now. And I have the funds and they have it right there and accessible for us right now for immediate needs. We're talking about mattresses, new mattresses for the jail. It's not in our budget for that. And they're about $75 to $85 per mattress. So that's the funds that we're using to help the inmate wellness. So I have no issue with that. And then having our invoices come to us when we order something and send it over to our county treasurer or our county clerk's office and have them issue the check. So they have the accountability of it. My concern is that putting that in the general fund so we get our surplus up to a accessible thing is I'm not going to have access, and my jail's not going to have access to those funds. And I think it's really important that our inmates have access. It's because that's fun. That money's coming from our inmates. Our inmates are buying different commissary, different things than you have when they're in jail. And the profit that we take from that, from our vendor, is supposed to be used for those guys, for the inmates. So I would caution about putting it into a general fund, but putting it into like Mike had said, they have a inmate wellness account. It's a separate account and it's accessible by the jail administrator for needs for our inmates. Thank you.
Thank you, Mick. Board, do we have any questions?
If I could just
Go.
add to that a little bit and clarify it just a little bit. What the sheriff said is correct. Okay, first of all, Brown County does not put phone commissions in that wellness fund. They just do canteen profit in there. So that's a slight difference. And I don't know, and I don't know all the counties that responded there because most of my time was spent working on the eastern and central part of the state. A lot of those were in your area here. So I don't, and Washera County is another county I'm quite familiar with. The phone commissions is a general fund revenue. So that would be a possible. And anyway, and maybe just to clarify too a little bit is there is not a legal requirement or a statutory requirement that these monies be spent for prisoners. It's generally a policy decision that counties have made. And I certainly don't disagree with that policy decision. They derive from inmates' money that should they have the benefit of this profit. I mean, I don't dispute that at all, but I just want to tell you that really is a county finance committee, decision to create this fund. It's not legally required. Just to
If I may add on that and expand on that, we do have electronic monitoring devices that we have, that those funds now go to the county, the money that we take in from the monitors. And that's usually between 4,000 and up to 8,400, I think it was for December, I think it was.
Yeah.
So that fluctuates by the amount of inmates that we have on an electronic monitor. And when they're on a monitor, I have a correctional officer that monitors them, has a GPS tracking device that they pay for and everything else on there. So we do put those funds into that. I don't think I'd have a problem putting the data, phone stuff from the inmates, even though that's generated by the inmates. Inmates are buying these cards so that they can text or call home or do what they want to try and do. So they have that in there. The biggest money that we have from the inmates is from the commissary, from the canteen. So I would just caution the county to take that money and put into a general fund so it's not accessible for the jail.
And if I can also interject, this is Lieutenant Lavasser from the Ashland County Jail. The inmates are who pays for the phone system. The county does not. That is not a budgeted item from the county. That comes out of that fund as well. The inmates pay for their phone systems. And so that is why that's why they've been keeping the profits from that. They pay for the phones, so that's why they are keeping the profits for it, for inmate usage.
Thank you. Pat?
Well, part of what this discussion informs me is that there's a lot going on with finances in the sheriff's budget that I'm not aware of. And the discussion also suggests to me that I'm going to have a hard time of knowing just what gets used for what and what level of accountability and oversight there is. I did look at our audit the last few days, and the things that really strike me is, especially being on finance, is the county should follow what are called generally accounted accounting principles, GAP for abbreviation. And for state and local government, there's a general accounting board standard, GASB. Our consultants are following those guidelines. The recommendations are based on those. And so, and there's for good reasons. And so I want to do things that are consistent with that. I also want transparency. We can say that some of this money is generated, by the inmates, but I'm also aware that the county has investment in that building. I wonder who pays the electric bill for the machines that cool, refreshments, those sort of things. And so, I do support the money being used for inmates, but I also want to feel like that we, that are elected to provide oversight, understand what's going on and where. And it's, we dealt with highway a few minutes ago. Yes, we're going to fund highway, and support, what they need, and the same is true of every department. But when we don't know what's going on and where and how this money is being used, then I think at least I personally feel like I'm failing in part of my responsibilities, as far as the oversight. And I would like to see it used for inmates, but I'd also like to see, understand who's making the decisions and how that gets used. Is there input on that? And if you need mattresses, it strikes me that should be coming from somewhere besides the money generated from, the canteen. That I think should be part of the county budget. That's my personal feeling. But those proceeds from the canteen, to me, it would strike me as, supporting things that inmates might not otherwise have, as they're there, or needs to help them with their family, as simple as postage for writing letters, or paying for phone calls they can't otherwise make. I don't know how that money is being allocated, and that makes me uncomfortable. So I'm going to make a motion to support the recommendations from our consultants.
A point of order. There's a motion on the floor. I'm going to make the second so we can continue the discussion then. And then if we could recognize the sheriff.
Motion second. Who's online? Okay. Philomena? Hello?
Hi, everyone. Thank you for recognizing me, Chairman. I want to make a couple points. One of the points that I'd like to begin with is that the Public Property and Law Enforcement Committee, of which you and I and Laura are a part of, has for months, probably more than a year, requested from the jail and the sheriff's department that they provide an accounting of their finances. This bank account, having been surfaced by the work of our financial experts, comes at a big surprise to me. And so I do want to note in the record that the committee has not been provided with the financials as requested for more than a year. The other point that I want to make, I support, funding for exactly what Pat was saying, for not basic things like mattresses, but for reading materials, for writing materials, for art supplies, for, there's a lot of things that the people in the jail need for their own enjoyment, edification, because oftentimes they sit in there without anything, without support from their families. And because of the vendors that were chosen by the jail, they're required to pay exorbitant fees to even have an email come into them, any kind of communication. And so, there has not, to the best of my knowledge, there has not been any public scrutiny or county board participation in the choosing of these vendors and picking vendors that have more limited fees. Instead of choosing vendors that have high fees and then come in back into a fund, that's supposed to be used for the benefit of the people who are incarcerated. But I didn't hear that they have any input on the decisions that are being made. Why not pick vendors that provide lower cost to the people who are incarcerated so that they can actually maintain healthy community connections while they are being incarcerated? My third point, reflecting, on what Pat said earlier, the standards that are used for accounting, the GAP and the GASP, those have been, those are a key element of our democratic society. So county oversight of spending and, taking these, making sure that the same policies that apply to spending for out of this fund apply to all the other spending that the county does, is to avoid overspending, avoid collusion in picking your vendors, and to ensure that there's some oversight of the spending so that it's actually being spent in the interest of the public and to benefit the people with whom it's supposed to benefit. I think it's fine to set these profits aside in a separate account. And I agree that it should not go into the general fund. But I take real issue with the idea that the jail gets some special way of spending money, because the policies on spending and the policies that this board has approved and the finance committee has approved are there for very specific reasons. Thank you.
Thank you, Philomena. There was another, did Mick have something to, you're good? Laura?
If this money is put into the general fund, is it going to create any kind of backlog or lag for the sheriff's department as they go ahead with this wellness fund / spending?
No, again, it's going to be put in the general bank account and into a separate accounting fund, not the general fund, is what I'm suggesting. So
It'll be in a restricted account.
yeah.
So, and then, this way, the money will be accounted for in our auditing process every year. And everybody will know what's there.
Yeah, and in the future will be budgeted, but
Yeah. And
we're 2 months late in the game, but still develop a budget anyway, really.
Yeah. Yeah. So the sheriff's department will be able to budget for it during the annual process, how they want to spend it, even if some of it is contingency, or for lack of the better word, maybe he wants to put $10,000 into contingency because he doesn't know what's going to happen. But there will be budgeting for it at least, and accountability.
Okay, then point of clarification. Pat, was your motion, did your motion say into the general fund?
My motion was to support the recommendations that the consultants provided, and my understanding is consistent with what the administrator just said.
Okay.
With that, no further discussion. I'll call for the vote. Do you have something, Pat?
No.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carried. Thank you. Item next, carbon tax credits.
Chris Hoffman from Forestry will be handling most of this.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Hi, Chris.
Good morning. As I'm sure everybody's aware, carbon offsets has become a hot button issue in public forests in Wisconsin over the last year or so. The forestry department has been researching different companies that are offering projects in carbon. We feel Blue Source is the corporation to go with. They've been around for just over 20 years, I guess. They've they put together a prospectus for the county forest. And if everybody can look at the carbon revenue projection sheets, I see Dan's got it on the computer as well. It's basically the nuts and bolts of the proposal. We'll have to sign a 10-year contract with Blue Source. We make a 40-year commitment to carbon markets, which essentially means we're going to continue to do what we've been doing for at least the next 40 years. And then it breaks out the nuts and bolts as far as tons of carbon sold, the average price, which is an estimate, the expenses of the project on an annual basis, and then the revenue that comes back to the county. We feel in forestry that this revenue is complementary to the timber revenue that we produce now. It's essentially, we're going to get an additional passive revenue stream to continue to do what we've been doing. I took this to the forestry committee and they approved it. And so now we're bringing it to finance, and I understand we're going to take it to exec as well before it goes to the full county board. I guess I can answer any questions that anybody has. I'm sure there's questions.
Pat Kenny, please.
This is Pat. My first question is, Blue Source has a 3,000 acre minimum requirement. Is it possible that they could work with what they call an aggregator? So if there's other private landowners in the county, that Blue Source could then work with that aggregator?
There's actually, well, our project is over 36,000 acres that we're developing. As far as smaller projects, there are other carbon companies out there that are tailoring their programs to work with the smaller landowners. NCX will work with people that have as few as, I believe, 10 acres. And they'll actually develop a project for that 10 acres. It's got to have timber on it, but they'll work down as small as 10 acres.
So I was looking at some of those online, and I think Blue Source, the numbers here are certainly competitive. And so I'm also thinking the efficiency, if we're working with Blue Source, and if you have looked into, or at some point look into, if at the county level, whether it's through finance, extension, however it might happen, is to explain this opportunity to private forest landowners. If we can aggregate enough of them, that would bring more revenue into the county. That's good for the county in a lot of ways, but there might also be some efficiencies going forward in terms of the maintenance and record keeping on this, that if we're all working with the same company. So if you know anything at this point on that, I'd be curious, but I'd be curious to explore that further.
I don't, other than NCX program, I've not talked with Blue Source about possibly doing something like that. But I am making a note here.
Okay. Have you looked at the Excel Energy power plant? Is there any implications to, if we approve this, on their use of wood chips for their power plant?
No, there's not. This project allows the county forest to continue to manage itself the way we have been within the bounds of state statute. So it doesn't really change what we do day to day. So any of the product or byproduct coming off the county forest that's going to the cogen plants will not be affected.
Okay. And then just as a comment from looking at the effect of the war with Ukraine on the carbon credit market, there's two markets: the compliance market, which is Europe and California, maybe some other states, and then there's the voluntary one. Those prices have declined sharply quite recently, the last week or two. So these numbers here are from prior to that. And so I think at the moment, at least, these are very strong numbers in terms of what they're offering.
Mr. Kinney's correct. However, global fuel prices are impossible to predict from one week to another, much less 1 year to another. Gas, what's going on in Europe right now may not be the only stressors that hits petroleum. I mean, anything could happen in Africa or the Middle East or we could get oil from other countries to offset. It's so, I think we have to go with the best information we have available and not try to project too far in the future.
Thank you. Go ahead, Pat.
Well, the point of my comment was, these are strong numbers based on the current market, and I'm supporting that we say yes to it.
Yeah, because the market will continue strong. One thing these high oil prices are going to do, it's going to force a conversion to renewables, and people are going to still need these credits to
Yes.
operate legacy fuels.
Marty?
The forestry committee's been looking at this for quite a while, and these numbers, I guess, are the best information we have. So at this point, I think I would make a motion that we proceed with this project and refer it to the executive committee.
I will second that motion with comments on it too. I watched Bayfield County go through this process with the same company. It just makes sense. We're already doing these things. We're managing our forests well. Basically, they pay us for just being us, and we're not going to get that a lot. But as a strategy for our future, trying to do projects like this is in the best interest of all the people that we represent. So I am definitely in support of this.
Any other comments?
Yep. Chairman Berlin,
Yes.
this is Supervisor Murdick. I have a comment, and I just want everybody to be aware of this as we go forward. No matter where these numbers for revenue break down, the county has to look at this long term and say, okay, we're going to get revenue in these early years, and it looks like a lot of money. We have to be careful how we spend this money, where we put it, how we use it, because in the latter years, it reduces by quite a bit. My biggest fear as a county board supervisor is getting new revenue, which I'm all in favor of, and spending it long-term when in years 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10, the amount of money we get is going to be reduced. So we have to be careful, and I'm sure our administrator and our forestry department supervisor can talk about this. We have to be careful we don't spend this money where we think we're going to need it in 6 years. Because as good as this is, and I like this project, we have to be careful that we don't long-term spend this money, that we use it for what we need at the moment, invest some of it, whatever we need to do. But don't spend this money on a project that we're going to have to pay for in 10 years, because this money's not going to be there if you look at the chart. Again, I'm all for this project, and I think the supervisor of the forestry department and Dan can sit down and talk about, do we take a bit of this money and set it aside for forestry needs? But as a county, we need to be careful we don't spend this money 10 years from now.
Thank you. Philomena?
Yeah, this is Supervisor Quebec. My concern is that there are a lot of companies that are packaging up carbon credits and assisting with the development of these projects. And I appreciate the fact that the forestry department has been doing its homework and really working on picking out a firm that is going to provide the most benefit for the county. When it comes up for full board review or executive committee review, I would like to see some of the homework that's been done in order to research this company and compare it to other companies, and especially because this is a very big project. And at Bad River, we're kind of looking at we're also looking at carbon credits as well, but we're probably going to have to do a public RFP process, because that's what's required as the tribe, as a government, according to our policies. And so, a deviation from, a public process like a request for proposals, I believe requires some really specific information about exactly why this company is the company to go with. That's all, Miigwech.
Thank you, Philomena. With that, with no other comments, discussion, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye, please.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carried. Thank you. Item next is the approval of the, or disapproval of the Novato request for county funding for broadband expansion.
I expected Novato to be here, but I guess they're not. What they're doing is they're one of the companies that's bidding on the new broadband infrastructure. There's a bunch of money coming in from the federal government and from the state government to move broadband all across the country, especially into underserved areas like Ashland County. Some of the grants require a public-private partnership. So they were asking for funding for part of that project. I believe, in my opinion, we can just give them a letter of support. I believe that's what most counties are doing. And if there's any dollar amount, it'd be minimal, like $10,000 we could support. But there is ample federal and state money out there. So I would suggest that we at least express support for the projects, because we definitely want at least access for all of our county residents. But we wait until a very specific number comes in to offer any money.
Marty?
Yeah, this is Marty Vitek. It seems to me that we really don't have any kind of proposal to act on, but the idea of supporting their broadband expansion is good, as long as there's no dollars tied to it at this point. Yeah.
So I guess I would be just asking for a letter, the ability to write a letter of support.
So I'd make a motion if that's necessary.
A motion by,
I'll second it.
and a second by Laura. Comments? Call for the vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carried for the administrator to develop a letter of support. Item next, update on the investments.
Okay, this is just a information only thing. We can answer any questions if you have them.
Floor is open to the board for any discussion. Information only. With that, we'll move on. Tax credit or sales tax report.
Sales taxes are looking good. They're up from previous years. I expect that they're going to continue to go up.
Yes.
Like I said, I expect them to continue to go up through the year. I do think we're going to have a very good summer here for taxes, tax-wise.
I was looking at this at home and stuff like that, and I said, wow, why, for February being so much higher than last year, is just.
Part of it's gas tax. Part of it is the hotels are still full. There's been a lot of winter events here. They had to book across the bay. They had they've been doing some things, at least with ice caves in the bay here, instead of going out to the dangerous ones. But they're doing a lot of stuff, winter stuff, activities. It's drawing people up here. So we're getting good full hotels charging $300 a night. Our restaurants are benefiting. Everybody's benefiting, and I expect these numbers to go way up. I do think that fuel prices are going to keep people from flying off to distant places. So I think we will see more state residents coming, making the short trip to places like Ashland.
Well, one of the things I brought to mention, I believe at the last county board meeting, was I picked up a winter fun book at one of our local restaurants, family restaurant. And as a matter of fact, I did allude that at one point in time, I was going to meet with Mary after that county board meeting, which I did. And that's only, she says, well, I can't advertise everything that's out there.
Yeah.
However, she will be advertising in the summer fun time book. As a matter of fact, she currently has looking at putting a half-page ad for the Chamber of Commerce, Ashland Chamber of Commerce, into some fun guidebook. And I wanted to talk to her about that, and that's only going to generate revenue out there. They have a subscription of 15,000+ fun books out there, and there's some discussion that they may print more than that even this year. So all good things, all good things. Pat?
This is Pat. I want to add that with inflation, things are costing more. And so our sales tax, which is based on prices, is going to go up. So, that will help offset some of what's going to happen with highway.
Item next, M3 report.
Information
only.
Information only, yeah. I guess I'm not sure what to make of the numbers, considering most people went to the doctor at the end of, in December. So we'll see how it goes.
Dealing with M3, I don't know if you sent out like the year-end report that, not yet, okay.
We're good, Laura?
One more thing. It would be nice to have M3 do at least quarterly updates with us and then let us know about the strategies. Have they met with the employees and started that wellness plan yet?
They're still working on the wellness plan. Heather and I have a meeting with them next month, I believe. So I will set up a finance committee meeting with them to come up and, shoot for May after we have finance committee, we know for sure.
Yeah, I don't care if they're online or in the room, but
Yeah.
we should be having regular updates since, we
Yep.
let it, previous to you, we let her tank big time. So
Yeah,
I'd rather keep an eye on it.
So yeah, I'll try to set up a meeting for May.
I'm thinking that was discussed at one point in time by having a quarterly.
Yeah.
Matter of fact, I think you may have brought that up previous.
So,
Yeah, that's
So-
good.
so May M3 update. And then we can have them come back again towards the end of summer, which actually would fit well with budget time.
Got some.
Just something that has to do with budgets. It would be nice to start looking into getting public input on what our budgeting priorities should be. Last year, we did it a little late in the budgeting season, so the sooner we can jump on that, the better. And the more input we can get with all different kinds of ways of getting the input.
Then after we have a new finance committee, we can set up a public hearing for that.
Let's get through the selection first. And then-
Yeah, after we have a finance committee.
Thank you. Item next, administrators update.
I think most of my stuff has been on today already. We're still working on. We're still looking at, I'm thinking about bringing to the executive committee a resolution that would empower the county treasurer to go to every single bank in the area and find out what accounts are sitting out there. I think there still might be accounts that we don't know about. And if the county board will pass a resolution stating that the county treasurer should have access to every single account, she's a signer and that's her job as treasurer. So I think we're going to be doing that, and that way we'll find out if there's anything out there we don't know. I think that'll help us bring along our finances better. We're still watching expenses, trying not to spend money when we don't have to, and I'm hoping that this year we're going to do a lot better than we did last year. As far as the building goes, I know people are probably wondering about that. We have not been able to find a contractor to do the first phase, which is a couple $1,000 job. So that may have to wait for the whole bigger job to be done. I'll be honest, nobody wants to come out and do $2,000 worth of work. They got thousands more work out there every day. We did have one contractor shy away because there's cellulose insulation upstairs. And nobody wanted to run a blowtorch on paper, which I guess I don't blame them. So we will have the architect, structural architect, engineer, come here, I think in May. He's going to come when the snow melts to do a full inspection of the building then. And then he'll have the scope of work for the entire building. We're also going to send him down to the 514 building, which is in terrible shape. If anybody wants to go look at it, I'll be happy to take you down. But you'll start seeing gaps between the addition where the elevator is and the wall of the current building. So we're going to have to do something with that building too. So a heads up, there might be large expenses coming up with that building, either abandoning it and getting a new one, or repairs or something. So I wish I had better news on that. But anybody who wants to come see it, I'll be happy to take you down there. That's about all I got.
Thank you. Just a question. Could you tell us if we're going to have an executive meeting prior to the county board meeting?
Yeah, it's next week on the 15th or 16th, Tuesday next week.
Tuesday next week.
Yep, I'll send you an email.
Thank you.
It's actually this Wednesday next
Wednesday,
week.
Wednesday
Yep.
the 16th. So next week on Wednesday.
And our next finance meeting?
Do you want? Well, I was going to talk to you about that. The election's April 5th. Reorganization's April 19th. If you want to have a meeting in between, we can. It will be a lame duck finance committee. So I don't know if you want to wait till after the election or not. That's up to you guys.
I would think if there was something priority we needed to do.
Yeah.
Well, the question is there anything pressing?
There's
that
nothing.
needs to be acted on?
There's nothing pressing that I know of right now. That doesn't mean next week there won't be. So I mean, it's just as a general rule, I prefer to wait until after reorganization so we don't have a lame duck finance. But if we need to, yeah.
Marty?
Executive can consider that.
With that?
This is Pat. For the person taking minutes at 9:30, the chair recognized that Supervisor Negro came, but actually at 9:15, she entered
Yeah.
the room.
9:15 it was.
Yep, I saw her come in, so we're good.
Oh, okay, thank you.
The floor is open for a motion.
I'll make a motion. We adjourn. Supervisor Skender.
I'll second that.
I have a motion by Ron and second by Laura to adjourn. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. Motion to oppose, same sign. Motion carried.
Thank you, everyone.